Thanks for logging on to Wayne.com for a sectional final preview edition of Inside the Zone. Reggie Hayes of the News Sentinel joining us. And Reggie, before we get started in the games, an absolutely insane first week of the playoffs. It got even nuttier in week 2, but it was great to see because if you played out all the games on paper, you'd have all the favorites winning. But man, that's what makes a great season is when teams like Norwell, who didn't win a game in the regular season, and teams like Dwenger, who stumbled. We're now talking about these teams playing in a sectional championship game.
Well, you know, I was looking at the statewide. There's one game with 2 under 500 teams playing in it, and that's the Norwell-Dwenger game. Dwenger 5-6, Norwell 2-9. Norwell the lowest win total of anybody left in the tournament. Obviously, they had no wins in the regular season. So one of those teams is going to make a season out of what had been a disappointment on both sides.
And we will delve into that game very much coming up here in just a few minutes. But we're going to start off in 5A. And really the anticipation for this Snider-Northside game. When you saw the brackets came out, you figured Northside had a good chance to make it to this game. You figured Snider or Homestead, whoever came out on top of that, would also be in the game. We've seen this matchup before, earlier in the season, 17-6.
Right.
Snider, but that was a really wet game. Will anything change, you think, this time around?
You know what? I think it's really hard to beat a team 2 times in a row in a season. I think North struggled with South a lot of ways because of that. You know, you're used to each other, and there's a little extra edge to the team that lost the first time around. Now, Snider, I think, has been very, very productive during the postseason. They have been as sharp as anybody can be for the most part. You know, they had that game with Carroll, or not with Carroll, with Homestead, where they got out big, and then Homestead came back, but they were solid. Northside had to scramble to win that game last week. I think the desperation of wow, we were almost out of it, probably feeds the fire a little bit for their motivation going into the Snider game. They got to avoid turnovers. I mean, if Northside can avoid turnovers, this is a game that can go down to the wire.
As far as avoiding turnovers, that's kind of easier said than done against this Snider defense because they have been fantastic. You take a look, it starts with the defensive line and the senior leadership of Weston Painter. Nick Reese is back there as well. Just a talented overall group, and we haven't seen a defense like this can swarm the football in quite some time at all this year, I wouldn't say.
As far as Snider's defense goes, I mean, they're so quick, they're strong, they've got playmakers at every spot more or less. I mean, you're right. It is a hard team to avoid somebody either stripping the ball, you know, jumping a route, picking off a pass. I mean, it's very difficult to play against, and they've been stronger and stronger as the years gone on.
If you're Ryan Hall this week, do you have to throw out any extra motivation for this week? Because you know what happened early in the season at Chambers Field. This game is going to be at Chambers Field. I mean, there seems to be no extra motivation needed.
I'm sure Ryan Hall will be hoarse by 5 minutes before the game because he's the type of guy who is, you know, a gung-ho motivator type of guy, but there's nothing he can say. I mean, this team has been shooting for this matchup, the rematch with Snider. You know, we talked about looking at the games on paper and how they don't always come to be. Mm-hmm. This game more or less came to be how many people thought it would be. There's no extra motivation needed. These guys know each other on and off the field.
Well, thinking about how games were supposed to end up, sectional championship games were supposed to be when the brackets came out, a lot of people had Penn. They've had great success in the postseason. They made it to the state championship game in 5A last year. But that would have meant you've been overlooking the Carroll Chargers. And what a job by Doug Dinan's team to go to Penn and win by 14-13 last week.
Biggest win he's had since he's been the Carroll coach. Biggest win at Carroll for a long, long time. This week, Doug Dinan was named the Colts NFL Coach of the Week. So, I mean, statewide, it was a big, big game, big win. And the thing it does is it takes Carroll from that, you know, we think we can, to, hey, we've proven it on the field. We are a contender in a 5A level. And to put that together in the relatively short time that he's done it, I think has been tremendous. I mean, that's well-deserved as a coaching recognition for what he's been able to do.
Well, going into last week's game, we knew a little bit more about Penn because we've seen them play Snider. They had played Snider three times in the last 2 years. South Bend Adams, over in this part of the state, a little bit of a question mark or a little bit of an unknown, I guess I should say. What do you see as being the biggest key in this game against a South Bend Adams team that's putting up 44 points a game in the playoffs?
Well, clearly they're a team that can score, as you said. They got beat rather soundly by Penn when they played each other. You can kind of look at that, but this doesn't always tell you what's going to happen in playoff time. Carroll has to keep doing what it's been doing. And, I mean, when you look at what Carroll's been spreading around their offense, different guys coming up with the big plays at certain times, I think Carroll just keeps playing the way they've been playing, both sides of the ball. And you've got a team that when you get to this level and you're coming off a big win, the key is not to say we've made it, we beat Penn, look what happened, you know, look how much we accomplished. And I'm sure that Doug Dinan has said, okay, you know, probably yesterday, day before, whenever it was, he said, forget it, it's over with, now we move on. So.
And speaking of forget it,